Hi, I'm Richard Buskin, author and co-host of one of those other podcasts, and you're listening to the Fab Four Free-for-All.
Welcome to another edition of the Fab Four Free-for-All. My name is Rob Leonard, and today I'm your moderator. Joining me, of course, is my co-host, Mitch Axelrod.
Hey, folks.
And Tony Triguardo.
Hi, folks.
And today, for the first time ever on our show, we have three guests who have written a book. They've gotten together. They've written a book called The Beatles Fab Four Cities, Liverpool, Hamburg, London, and New York. Follow in the Fab Four's footsteps. Our guests today are Richard Porter, representing London and Hamburg, Susan Ryan, who we see at the fest all the time, representing New York, and my friend, the unofficial mayor of Liverpool, because I've seen him deal with people in Liverpool, because I've hung out with David in Liverpool. I went on Richard's tour in London. Susan, I've not yet gone on your tour. I apologize. So, anyway, we are going to.
You make it sound like it's the Beatles Olympics, Rob. Representing.
I know.
Well, it's like agony and defeat guy. It's the same. But that wasn't the Olympics, but that was something else.
Actually, it made it seem like a beauty show, and with the sachet that says New York and one says Liverpool, and
I'm Bert Parks.
I want world peace.
Yes. So anyway, we're going to start off with, first of all, our three guests. Just give a little background. We'll start off with David, and we'll start with David. And how did you get into the Beatles, and how did this all start?
Okay, as long as you promise to tell them which side of the car you're trying to get into.
Oh God, you son of a bitch! I will tell the story. I will tell a story because I'm sure you tell all your Liverpudlian friends that Rob Leonard, you were taking me on your little tour of Liverpool. And what did I do? When we had lunch, and then we went to your car. And what did I do? I waited on the U.S. American side where I would have gotten in if I was in America, but we're in Great Britain. And of course, you guys don't know where to put the steering wheel. So I'm waiting on the right-hand side of the car, and he goes, "Oh, Rob, you're in Great Britain. You get to go around."
I'll drive.
So, yes, and you drove. So, okay, start it off, David.
Okay, so my story with the Beatles starts with growing up in the Dingle, where Ringo is from. Literally, came out my back gate at the bottom of Madryn Street, where Ringo was born. I went to the primary school, or elementary school, that Ringo had gone to, St. Silas. I lived in the Dingle till I was 24. Then my wife and I, we moved out to an area to get away from all the Beatles ties. So the last 30 years, we lived just off Penny Lane. Our three daughters were born in the same hospital as John Lennon and went to the same primary school as John and George, Dovedale School, while I am still the chair of the governors at that school. So I've had sort of the Beatles around me all of my life. I got into the music when I started learning guitar, and the first songbook I got was The Beatles Complete, which I still have, battered, dog-eared, full of the wrong lyrics and wrong chords, but I still love it.
Right.
It's shocking. It's shocking. So I've always been a fan of the music, and it's through the connection with Dovedale, where my daughters were at school. We started doing some fundraising, and we wanted to raise some money for the playground, and the person who got in touch was Yoko. And Yoko gave a lot of money to the school. And I thought, that's a story somebody should read. And I wrote for the London Beatles Fan Club magazine, which of course Richard will know well. That's the first thing I ever wrote. It coincided with the time when I got signed off work because I wasn't well. I was in the insurance industry. I never actually went back to my full-time job. I was diagnosed later with fibromyalgia and arthritis. So my doctor told me to find something to do. What are you interested in? I said, well, funnily enough. And I just started writing, and I really got the bug and thought, well, how many people come to Liverpool for the Beatles? Lots. How many want to come? Millions. Why don't I tell the Beatles and Liverpool story? So I went to find a book on the Beatles and Liverpool and couldn't find one. And so it took me 9 years, but I wrote one called Liverpool. That for me, I was happy seeing it on the bookshelf in a bookstore. And I was happy at that point. The world obviously wasn't, because my life for the last, 12, 13 years has just been absolutely insane, which is where I've got to meet all you guys over at the fest. First time Abbey Road on the River, Washington was the first time we met all those years ago. And I've now either authored or co-authored 8 books on the Beatles, as well as being a tour guide and a documentary produced for Looking for Lennon. And apart from that, I'm supposed to have retired in theory.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, exactly. My doctor prescribed the Beatles, so I'm doing what I'm told.
Exactly. You just need a bunch of refills and you'll be good.
Exactly. And a new body, please.
Well, don't we all?
Okay, let's go to Richard Porter. He is the tour guide of the Beatles London. I've been on the tour. I loved it. How did that all start for you, Richard?
Well, hi guys. Well, I've been a fan since I was about 13 years old. Actually grew up in the Twickenham area, about 2 miles from Twickenham Film Studios, but was much too young. I was born in 62. If I was born the week Love Me Do entered the top 30 in the British charts. So I missed it first time. I was only, 7 when they broke up, basically. So came a fan, I was about 13 in the mid-70s when I was getting into punk. There's me into the Beatles. Met loads of people, met Paul McCartney for the first time in the early 80s. And we used to hang out outside Air Studios in Oxford Street. And we were kind of just hanging out and setting Paul outside there loads of times. Started the London Beatles fan club in 1988. And one reason being I wanted to meet someone, a lady friend, which worked. So I met my wife, Esther, who was the 3rd ever member of the club, and we married. So that worked.
Congratulations.
My wife, Irina, as well. Esther was from Russia. Sorry, Esther was from America. Irina's from Russia. So wouldn't have met them otherwise, apart from the Beatles.
International diplomacy.
Just about that. Yes, I know.
Something like that.
And started doing the tours in the early 90s, kind of a hobby. I was working in the bank at the time, took about square peg in round hole. So I decided that wasn't for me, decided to give it up. And I've been doing the tours pretty much full time since 1992. Did my first book, Guide to the Beatles London, which came out in the year 2000. It's basically the notes I had for the tour. I had so many notes and research, which I just couldn't use on the tours. Obviously did the London Beatles fan club magazine for a long time. Had to give it up when my first wife fortunately got ill. And I've been doing the tours ever since. Now I'm the manager of the London Beatles store. I was only the Beatles coffee shop for 10 years. So
that's still open, right? Beatles. I've been there.
Yeah, my favourite group is called the Rolling Stones. No, it isn't.
That store's still open, right, Richard?
It is, yeah.
My sister got coffee there.
Oh, right, good. Yeah, unfortunately we had to sell. Abbey Road Studios opened their own shop pretty much next to the studio and kind of brew us out the water, but oh well. And now the London Beatles store, which is a lot bigger. So.
And Susan Ryan, our fellow New Yorker, who we see at the fest every year, but now she's written a book, or co-written a book, I should say.
Well, she's written a book before, by the way.
What?
She's written other books.
Oh, really?
Edited other books, yeah.
I'm sorry, edited.
Yeah. But okay, so I'm obviously from New York, and I've been doing my tours probably for the last 15 years or so. But my tour was actually originated by another person, and when she moved away, she said, "If you want to continue doing these tours, by all means do," and I did. So in 2007, that woman, Trini Inigos, and I were the co-hosts of a DVD called John Lennon's New York. And we took a tour about John Lennon sites in New York City on video. And I became a Beatles fan like Richard in the mid-70s when I was about 14, around 1975. I was going to summer camp, and there was on Long Island, and there was a girl a little older than me, and she casually asked me one day if I liked the Beatles. And I said, yeah, they're okay. And they're okay became an obsession. So I've basically been a big Beatles fan for about 47 years plus. I call myself a first and a half generation fan because I was born in 61. So I was a little young when they were on the Ed Sullivan Show, but I remember the Saturday morning cartoons, and I remember seeing Yellow Submarine in the movie theater, and I remember, hearing their music on the radio. My earliest Beatles memory is hearing "We Can Work It Out" on WABC in 1965, and it's about 4 years old. And prior to the tour guide thing, and prior to this book, the book Mitch was talking about I was the editor and publisher of an online fan fiction magazine called Rooftop Sessions for about 7 years from the early 2000s. The magazine folded due to a lack of original material and also just some family things that came up with the magazine folded. But I did edit 4 editions of short stories from the magazine, and very proud of that too. Been going to the fests since 1977, and now I'm on staff, so I work at the fests, and I moderate the panels in the Paperback Writer discussion room, along with Wally Podrazik. We share the moderating duties. So I'm firmly entrenched in Beatle world, and have been for a very long time. And Rob, you have not taken my tour. I don't think any of you guys have taken my tour. We have to fix that.
I have.
Yes, David has, Richard has.
Well, again,
So, if they come all the way from England.
We came all that way.
We did.
Well, it's like that whole thing of how many of us that live in New York have been to the Empire State Building or been to, it's crazy.
Well, admittedly, it took me till I was 28 to go to the Statue of Liberty, but you've got no excuse now, guys. Come on.
Well, we'll work on it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. And again, this for all of you. Why are people so obsessed with walking in the Beatles' shoes and being where they were, or seeing their history in all 3 or all 4 of the cities, actually? And again, I preface that by saying, Hamburg is not usually a destination you hear of when people say, "Oh, I'm gonna go to London and Liverpool." That's automatic. But like no one from San Francisco is going, "I'm going to New York just to see where the Beatles were." But, and again, we'll get to that too, and you'll tell me that I'm wrong, or mostly wrong. But what is it that makes the people want to still be in those shoes of the Beatles or the places they were? David,
I think one of those things I've found is that whatever sort of grabs you, I think in the age somewhere between 12 and 16, whatever music grabs you, whatever celebrities grab you at that time, that will stay with you for the rest of your life. And I know, obviously, I was born in 65, so of course I missed all the Beatles stuff. The band I listened to was Status Quo. Just sort of a little bit old hat, but so the Quo were my Fab Four, right? Those guys, and they will always be the band that I followed because that was the first concert I went to. I wanted to dress like them. I had all the records. I've still got all the records. They were the guys. I've got their autographs. So that was the music that stayed with me. But obviously, the Beatles music is what I've discovered and what I love. And what I find, and Dilchi will probably say the same thing, is when we do our tours, we can do the exact same route with 2 different groups of people, and the tours will be completely different. And the beauty, particularly of doing private tours, is it's where that person is coming from. Now, funnily enough, just what you were saying then, Mitch, about where you associate with the Beatles, I had a couple of Americans on tour last week and said they've always wanted to come to London and Liverpool. And I was telling them about the book, and they said, "Are there any Beatles sites in New York?" And I said, yeah, well, don't forget Ed Sullivan. "Oh, yeah, and Shay." "Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that." And they didn't sort of think of that as New York.
Right.
And then obviously I said, "Well, if you buy the book, then get in touch with Susan." You're laughing. So no commission needed.
Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate that, actually. It's terrific.
No, you know what, David?
That's what
You're
I
right,
found.
David. You're right, though. I mean, as far as we live in New York, and Tony was right. Up until a certain time, I never went to the Empire State Building, and maybe we take it for granted because we're here. That the Ed Sullivan Theater is now the Stephen Colbert place where he does it, and we don't care. And not that we don't care, but like the Paramount Theater is important. It's in the book, but maybe to New Yorkers, we don't really associate that with the Beatles. But obviously Central Park we do and stuff. But maybe because also it's exciting for New Yorkers to go overseas and get the connection there as well. So, speaking of overseas, how about you, Richard? What do you feel? Why did people need to go on your tour and associate with what the Beatles did?
I agree with David, definitely. But also people see it like it's a pilgrimage and it's recreating things. Abbey Road, I mean, it's the place everyone in London wants to see. I mean, it's still to this day, there's a webcam on the Abbey Road crossing. And every minute of every day, there's people on that crossing wanting to recreate the picture.
And some of the people who come to Liverpool, some of the people who come to Liverpool want to visit Abbey Road as well.
I know, yeah. And people go to Liverpool Street Station in London, they're going to see the Cavern Club. So there you go.
Well, one thing about the Abbey Road crossing, for those who will do it again or do it for the first time, when people do it, they tend to do scissor. They put their hands in a scissor formation. And if you look at the Beatles, they're not really in scissor formation. So I didn't kind of realize that until I did mine. I realized my arms are too stiff. And I went back and I tried to, fix it.
You weren't stoned enough, Rob.
Maybe that's true.
No, I'm going to claim the world record of the number of crossings of Abbey Road. I must have been that crossing up 10,000 times. I think, over the years, so.
And it still aggravates the drivers. If I lived in that area, I would avoid Abbey Road at all possible costs. They get annoyed when people are stopping traffic, and you're kind of like, why? You drive here, It's crazy.
We have the same problem on Penny Lane.
Yeah.
Because all the fans come. There's buses. Last week there were 4 buses lined up on Penny Lane, and people just wandering around. And as a local resident, they go berserk. And there's not even an official crossing like with Abbey Road. At least you got a point where you can aim and try and knock over a Beatles fan. Whereas it's random here.
I was just about to say, David, you and Richard, you guys must be marks at this point for some of the people in that area.
Yeah.
The stress.
Well, I
At least
remember
I know
when
the doormen at the Dakota don't want to run me over,
Exactly. Right. You're on the subway, right, Sue? You're saying.
And Sue, how about you?
Well, it's really funny what you said about people going to Liverpool Street Station and expecting to see the Cavern, or David saying they expect to see Abbey Road in Liverpool. I get a lot of times where were the red gates when I take people to Strawberry Fields in Central Park, and my response is the red gates are in Liverpool, so you need to take a trip 3,000 miles across the ocean to see that. Fortunately, I don't get that often. But I think people want to walk in Beatles' footsteps, and a lot of times people don't realize there's a group history in addition to just John Lennon's history, because of course he lived here, so people associate him with New York City, and of course we have Strawberry Fields in Central Park, which is a memorial to him. But people don't always realize that there are multiple sites aside from the Ed Sullivan Theater and the Plaza Hotel that are Beatles related in New York City, and there is a great connection to New York. And what I find is that Beatles fans find me. They either find me by word of mouth, they find me because they've gotten my card at a fest, or they find me because they look on the internet. They really do want to, it's like living vicariously. It's like living that bit of history. And like David said, when you are between the ages of, say, 12 and 16, that music stays with you for life. I was 14. I was exactly the right age, and it didn't matter that it was 10 years after the Beatles came to America. It did to me exactly what it did to girls, 10, 11 years previously, or the same age I was at the time. So I think when you are that kind of a fan, you look for those places. And so what I find with my tours in New York is I get people who have actually got out of their way to look for a Beatles-related thing in New York City. And they know what they're looking for, and they find me.
It's funny, Sue, because I remember years and years ago, I was when I started doing radio, we had a chance to get work with Ray Coleman, and Ray had come to New York and was staying at the Warwick. And I remember it just sort of being mind blowing, because it was the first time when I made a connection for myself with one of those places. I'd been to, how many different times you go past the Ed Sullivan Theater or whatever. but that was, and there was that certain kind of vibe of
Yes.
you know, going in that hotel, going in that elevator, going up to, you know, meet Ray, and it is very cool.
Yeah, it is definitely.
I've done weed in the Delmonico. No, I'm kidding. And I listened to Dylan. I listened to Dylan. He wasn't there.
Listen, there you go.
Good luck to you if you found the Delmonico. These days, it's not there anymore. It's the Delmonico.
right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right.
But
Wow.
So David, with you, I mean, we want to go through each one of you, but we don't want to give away the book because, I mean, you know, meaning give away what's in the book because there's so much great stuff there. And just to let people know that you guys have also connections, you know, within the, you know, every city and everything. And I think there's a lot of humor. It's really, the book is fantastic, number one, but without giving away everything, can each one of you say what the top 3 sites, maybe not maybe the top 3, but maybe your favorite sites to visit, maybe, you know, because again, maybe the top site for David might be Strawberry Fields, but maybe that's not the favorite of people. So each one of you, can you give your 3 sites that you really love to show?
I always like going to Penny Lane, and it seems an obvious one, but when I was working on my Liverpool book all those years ago and living in the area, everything I'd read about why the song was written, how it was written, it had never completely made sense. I thought I was just a throwaway song until I understood the area and understood the geography. And it's only then that the song comes to life.
Yeah.
Because there's 3 penny lanes. And there's nothing I like better when I'm on a tour to stand at the Penny Lane roundabout and just explain what the song means. And what most people don't get is that when they're singing it in their ears and in their eyes, Penny Lane was the centre of the childhood for John, Paul and George. It's not just a little place where they visited occasionally. Their whole childhood revolves around that area and those places. The barber was real. The banker was real. The fireman was real. And the most exciting thing I found all those years ago was not only was the pretty nurse real, but that John Lennon had relaxed first, not Paul McCartney, because I found out who the nurse was. And the nurse was the girlfriend of John's best mate, Pete Shotton. And
Wow.
Beth married Pete Shotton. And John put his best friend's wife in a Beatles song and nobody knew. And
Wow.
suddenly the whole song came to life for me because that's where John grew up. That was his first 5 years was spent in Penny Lane.
Hey, David, quick question for you. Do you still get people who think that the nurse was selling puppies from a tray?
Oh my goodness, the amount of times, yeah, that comes up all the time. She was not selling dogs. They were puppies. It's one of those things in translation. It actually came up 2 weeks ago again, and we got into this conversation of mishearing lyrics.
Oh.
And complaining, you know, that these Liverpool lads were singing, and for American ears, it was hard to understand. I said, well, the Liverpool lads had the same thing. That was the problem that, you know, Paul mentions on the day John met Paul, when they're singing the Del Vikings Come Go With Me. And Paul says, oh, it's great you've thrown in this line about going down to the penitentiary. He wasn't throwing the line is. Those lads listened to the radio and listened to the record and still couldn't work it out. Now, I listened to a digitally remastered version of the song. I couldn't work it out. I still had to look it up because it makes no sense. So these lads were tuning in like on Radio Luxembourg or Armed Forces Network late at night. So the reception's not great, it's crackly. And they got a pen and paper and they're scribbling down what they think they were hearing. Unless they were John Lennon and he went and actually stole the record from the local record store. This is how you got your lyrics. And if you couldn't understand them, you made them up. And so, yeah, there's misunderstandings on, I think one of the first ones I heard was, you know, on a heart that's oh so true. No, he said, I couldn't work out why it was a hot bath oh so true. So we get all kinds
what
of
you're
stuff.
doing, you know.
Yeah, well,
a hot bath can be oh so true.
If you're taking weed at the Delmonico, this is true.
There you go.
Was there a
More
spy camera
connections,
in that
David.
room?
More connections.
Also, let me ask you a question, David. Garden. How do you say the word garden?
Fate.
It's fate.
Yeah, obviously, F-E-T-E, fate. It's obvious.
Wait,
It's
couldn't
not
you argue
feet.
feet?
I mean,
I
obviously,
would say feet.
well, you got two of those.
Thank
So
you.
you had to pick one. No, it's
No, not
English
the Ruddles.
language.
It's not the Ruddles, David. It's
Oh, sorry, I just have to go into that, unfortunately. This is what my tours end up like. Because I do most of them with my friend Ian, and we've just, over the years, developed this double act, and people just sit back, and most of the time they can understand us.
You want to know something, though? I think it's great because the Beatles represented humor in so many ways. So
Absolutely.
if all of you were just boring, and I'm sure there's humor on every tour, because if they're not, then it could get just, it could get like reading Wikipedia. If we read Wikipedia and did our show, it would just be really boring. So I'm glad.
It's got to be, the personality's got to be there. And
yeah,
it's one of those things in Liverpool, you learn to argue and to fight with your mouth years before you fight with your fists.
I got a question for the three of you.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, wait, he hasn't talked about the other two.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought we were
And the other
jumping
two
around.
haven't answered.
No. Give me another 45
I'm
minutes.
sorry. Continue.
I'll be finished with my three.
All right, so quickly the other two. How's that?
Yeah, the other
Not Dirk McQuick.
St. Peter's Church, where John met Paul. I say to everybody, that is where the Beatles start, 6th of July, 57. At that time, the quarryman was John and his mates. There was mates they grew up with, they went to school with, they were having fun. Everything changed when Paul joined. So that is the place. If you're going to go to an important place, St. Peter's Church also, I love taking people there. And the third one is the one I discovered when I was doing Liverpool, which I'd never heard of, which was the Casbah. And the Casbah Coffee Club, historically for the Beatles, is more important than the Cavern. It's the birthplace of the Beatles. They were playing there before they went to the Cavern. In fact, it's Mona Best who ran the Casbah who got the Beatles into the Cavern. Of course, the Cavern is where Brian discovered them and where John, Paul, George and Ringo played and made it famous. But the Casbah is the big surprise for everybody, where you can see this club where you've got a whole ceiling hand-painted by John Lennon. You just put your hand up and touch it and it's there. Where he scratched his name into the wall, where Paul McCartney painted the ceiling, where George painted the walls. There is so much history in there and it's authentic. And that is always the wow factor. So I always say St. Peter's, that's where the Beatles start. Penny Lane, this is what the song means. And the Casbah, this is the birthplace of the Beatles.
Wow, cool.
I can do brief.
Yeah.
I've seen your briefs. No, I'm kidding.
I wasn't at the Delmonico.
The lawsuits.
Wait, that wasn't you?
Oh, it wasn't.
Now I must have been really stoned because I thought it was you.
That was me with my three heads. Yeah.
How about you, Richard?
Dog of two heads, right, David? Sorry.
Okay.
That's a Quo reference.
Cool.
Right. Okay, London. Well, the place in my picture here, number 3, Savile Row, is going to be right up there. Of course, 5 Emmys last night, so well done, Beatles. Of course, not only the rooftop, of course, the whole building, Apple, was quite an interesting place. I actually got the book The Longest Cocktail Party by Richard DeLillo, which is absolutely hilarious about all the stuff that went on inside. And I met loads of people that worked there. I met Derek Taylor, for instance, many years ago, and that was fun. And I met loads of people that worked at Apple. In 2019, we got a blue plaque erected on the building. Finally, there's now a commotion for the Beatles there. So we finally got together a committee and we got that plaque put on the building, which is great. I've been on the rooftop a few times. It's a picture I took. I've been up there about 4 times now. It normally cannot get on the roof, but I've been up there 4 times, which is great.
We've got to get a plaque that says, "Here is where Paul and Mal dragged Michael and Hogg up on the roof like a walrus." If you've seen Get Back, it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That was like the most hilarious thing. I love that part in part 2.
Yeah. And when we unveiled the plaque, we had a party on the street, and a lot of members of the Apple Scruffs came along.
Oh, cool.
They were outside. Kevin Harrington, who is, of course, the guy holding up the lyrics for John for Digger Pony, set up all the equipment. He's the Beatles roadie at the time. He was really with the Beatles from '68 till the end of their career, really setting up all the equipment in Abbey Road and on the roof. So a very important guy, very modest guy, and really nice. And we had a couple of musicians along, and they sang Apple Scruffs to the Apple Scruffs outside 3 Savile Row. They were standing on the steps in their usual place. And that was great fun. And I actually had a bit of involvement in Get Back, because Apple had this footage of two of the Scruffs being interviewed in '69 outside Savile Row. And Apple got in touch with me to ask if I knew who it was who was interviewed. And I got in touch with Sue, one of the Apple Scruffs. She couldn't remember. But then Apple sent me a screen grab from the film. It was Sue being interviewed.
Oh,
She
wow.
couldn't remember. Her and her friend Eileen. And they get a credit because of that.
Oh, nice.
And we went to a screening of the highlights to Get Back a few days before it's on Disney Plus. And it's the first time Sue and Eileen have seen each other in 50 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So I was at their reunion as well. So that was cool.
That's neat. See, the Beatles bring people together.
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
So certainly it's got a lot more popular in the last few months, Savile Row. A lot more people go there than they used to, that's for sure.
Now, it used to be an Abercrombie and Fitch, right? What is it now?
Yeah, it is. They're still their offices. They got, weirdly, the shops moved. They've still got their offices there and storeroom, I think. So you could actually, when it was Abercrombie, you can actually go into it. It had changed a lot. The only room that was similar was John and Yoko. Well, similar in kinds of architecture was John and Yoko's office, Bad Productions. But the rest of it had changed completely. The Beatles wrecked the place, basically. They had to gut the whole thing pretty much when the Beatles moved out. And it's been done at least twice since as well. So I've been in a few times, but it has changed a lot. But the rooftop looks fairly similar. I mean, there's that structure on the number 2 Savile Row, that glass structure, that's still there, for instance.
It almost looked like a greenhouse, you know?
Yeah, it's just that's what I thought it was to start. It's just kind of the entrance of the building, of the rooftop next door at number 2 Savile Row.
Oh.
It was not a
That's
greenhouse as such. Yeah, it's just a glass entrance to the roof.
And what's the other two for you?
Well, obviously Abbey Road is the obvious one, which everyone visits. You all know about Abbey Road. One quick story. Many years ago now, I had a guy recently from North Korea on my tour. He managed to get across the border into the south and became a Beatles fan because you cannot hear the Beatles in North Korea, obviously. And he wanted to come to London, and we got to Abbey Road. He dissolved into tears. It was like a symbol of his freedom, really, getting to Abbey Road, just seeing the crossing. That was one of the moments, I think, when I was doing tours. So yeah,
that's really cool.
Going and seeing all the people trying to get themselves killed on the crossing.
Well, Richard, you got to say that there are many people who get confused with the tube stations.
Oh God, yeah. A few years ago, about 10 years ago now, they opened a new station on the Docklands Light Railway, the underground, called Abbey Road. And it's near Stratford, near the Olympic site, about 10 miles from Abbey Road itself. It's only when you get to Abbey Road, there's a sign up saying, "Oh, by the way, isn't Abbey Road the Beatles? You've got to go to St. John's Wood."
Yeah.
Oh, God. What I'm going to do next? They call a station Buckingham Palace out that way. I don't know. I mean, for another name for it, you know.
Well, you could have a picture of Queen at the end of the tube for Buckingham Palace.
There you go.
Or Freddie Mercury dressed as
Sorry,
a
wrong one.
Yeah, wrong one. I know.
And what would be the third one for you, Richard?
Third one. I think it has to be 34 Montague Square, Ringo's apartment. Not only did Ringo live there with Maureen, of course, where Zach, with baby Zach, Jimi Hendrix lived there. And then after that, John and Yoko. Sorry?
Didn't he also wreck the place or no?
Sort of. No, it's been lots again. Every book you read has something different about why he was kicked out. Basically, it was the noise. One book said he painted the whole place black. The other said it was painted psychedelic. Exact opposite. But I mean, according to Kathy Etchingham, who was living it, it's basically because of the noise. But then, of course, John and Yoko. The Two Virgins album cover picture was taken there.
Right.
And it's because where John and Yoko got busted for marijuana by Sergeant Pilcher. Because that led indirectly to John and Yoko going to New York and getting all the other then the connections between the cities and that, and the problems with Nixon and everything else.
Yeah.
And,
Perfect segue.
The guy owns the only guy lives there now is a tailor called Henry Rose, who actually makes clothes in the basement where John and Yoko had the two virgins picture taken. Tailor making clothes. It puts new clothes.
He's actually clothing people where they were naked, taking their
off. Exactly. And he actually worked with Stella McCartney for a while and made clothes for Paul as well. So he lives there now. So
brings it all around.
Connections.
Yeah, connections.
Absolutely. Sue?
So obviously one of the favorite places people always want to see is Strawberry Fields in Central Park. The memorial to John Lennon, because of course John lived and unfortunately died in New York City, but this memorial is a living memorial to him. There's always people there. People want to take photos. I literally have to tell people that they have to jump in and get a photo when they have a chance, because people are just constantly trying to take photos. So I tell them, don't be polite. Just get in there and I'll take your picture real fast.
Don't be polite. Be a New Yorker. Don't be polite.
You'll never get your photo. Seriously. So that's
Rome,
pretty much
right?
Exactly. Learn to be a New Yorker. Come on now. Really, they're very nice people. No. But anyway, Strawberry Fields is the place that most people really want to see. So obviously it's a favorite place. I used to live not too far from there, so I would go there all the time. And was there constantly. Even when I wasn't doing tours, I was there all the time. I used to take my son there when he was little. We'd picnic, that kind of thing. So it's popular with families. It's popular with people who are huge John Lennon fans, huge Beatles fans. They all want to see it. The other places, the Ed Sullivan Theater. That people want to see that because, especially if they remembered seeing the Ed Sullivan show, it was a very big deal to see where that happened. And unfortunately, you can't get inside unless you have tickets to Colbert. They don't give tours. And tickets to Colbert are about 3 years out. So you kind of can't even get a ticket at the last moment, unfortunately. But they like to see the outside and they like to hear about it. And in 2014, on the 50th anniversary of the Beatles' arrival in America and appearance on Ed Sullivan, it was when David Letterman was still there, and they covered the marquee with a scrim that made it look like it did the night the Beatles were on. And so there's a lot of people who took my tour that weekend because the fest was in New York that weekend. It was in Manhattan, which it hadn't been in years. And I did 3 enormous tours that weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Richard came along on them, he knows, and David came along on one of them also. And people were really excited to see the marquee the way it looked then.
Cool.
And of course, if people have seen the film I Want to Hold Your Hand, which came out in 1979, they know the Ed Sullivan Theater and how well it was recreated in that film. So people like to see that. And the Plaza Hotel, people like to see the Plaza.
Really?
Especially if they're American, some of them have seen the footage, well, from all over the world, actually. They've seen the newsreel footage of the people outside the Ed Sullivan Theater. And I've got a couple of personal connections there. There's a girl about 13 years old who shows up in video all the time holding a sign that says, Elvis is dead, long live the Beatles. And that's my friend Irene. And I became friends with her through the fest. And she pops up everywhere. And I have a picture of Irene that I show during my tour. She pops up everywhere because it's news footage. So she's shown up in Japanese TV commercials. She's shown up in television credits. She showed up in the reel that scrolls on the screens at McCartney concerts. He kind of goes through his entire career. And here's Irene. She scrolls by. And so when I show that to people and if they saw the newsreels, if they're old enough to remember the newsreels, they go, oh my gosh, I saw that girl. And they love to see the Plaza. And well, it used to be before the pandemic. Unfortunately, they don't let you in there now. The Plaza was also, I hate to say it, the Plaza was a restroom stop. So we would go in and we go to the public restroom. But people would get really excited going inside the Plaza Hotel. They were just so thrilled that they were walking in where the Beatles went. And the Plaza, unfortunately, doesn't allow you into the lobby or the elevators. So you can't get to where they stayed because it's now about 60% condos. So they don't allow it. If you don't have a key to a room or a key to an apartment, you can't get in. But people get really excited walking through the Plaza. They love it.
Wow.
So mostly Strawberry Fields is the place. And they really want to see it. I have given that bit of the tour to people from all over the world, from Europe, from Asia, from Australia, from America, from Canada, you name it. They all want to see that. I always have to ask people, though, because we cross the street and we go over by the Dakota after that. And that's when my tour ends, by the Dakota. And I always have to ask people if they're okay to go over there. It can be a very emotional place for people. And standing on that spot on the sidewalk and looking at where, unfortunately, John died is very, very difficult for some people. And so, I try to leave people with something uplifted, and that is that John didn't just die in New York. He lived in New York. He wanted to live in New York. He chose to live, after growing up in Liverpool, living in London, he came to New York, and he chose to be a New Yorker. And so I try to leave people with that. He wanted to be in this city, and, we have to think about how he lived rather than how he died. So it's one of those things. But people like to make that pilgrimage.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was talking to Tony off mic earlier, and I said, with the 2 tours from, Liverpool, and I know we're not talking about Hamburg right now, but with the 2, because obviously no one's giving a tour of Hamburg, but when, Tony and I were talking, and I said, with the 2 tours for Richard and David, it's got to be happy stuff. And with yours, it goes from triumph to tragedy, from the Sullivan to the murder. I mean, you said he died.
Well,
Rob always says he was killed, and he's right.
Murdered.
He was murdered.
It's true.
So, I'm glad you handled that well, because I was thinking how that must be tough for you, because everybody's so happy and happy and happy, and wow, we did this, we just saw, and then all of a sudden it gets to
yes,
that.
You have to handle it delicately, and yes, I don't fudge it normally, and I say yes, John was murdered, because we all know it, and I can't beat around the bush with that.
Well, I got a question for the 3 of you, and the question is, how did you guys decide to write this book? And each of you have done individual things with your tours, and like David said, he's done Liverpool, and Richard did his. I have the book, the London book, and Susan, you've been doing this for a while. How did you guys get together and decide that this should be a book? Because Hamburg I wouldn't have thought about, but the other 3 are all connected in many ways, and not just because the Beatles were there. I mean, to me, when I was in Liverpool, I felt very connected to the people in Liverpool, and that included the cab driver who was asking about the Philadelphia Flyers because his son likes NHL hockey. When I was in the Cavern, some guy heard me speak, and he goes, "Mate, let me buy you a beer. You're from America." And then he got in a fight with someone. And then in London, I felt the same way, and not as much as Liverpool, but in London, I felt very connected in spirit, not just because the Beatles were there, just in, New York City is can be a loud place, and we're in everyone's face sometimes, but I felt a connection with Liverpool and London. So I was wondering how you guys came up with the decision to do the book, and have you all been on each other's tours? That's another thing too.
Well, I think you've sort of answered in a bit of a way of why we did it. For me, with the initial idea was I'd never planned to visit America. When thinking of holidays, that I'll go into Europe, until I went on to do my first Beatle event, which is up in for Charles Rose Night up in Stamford, Connecticut. So I came over there at the end of 2010, and it was a Thanksgiving weekend. And I thought, well, I've got some spare time. I'll take the train down to New York, go to Manhattan. And when I came out onto the streets and I looked at it, and exactly you said, Rob, I felt at home. And up until that point, I could never understand why John Lennon would want to live in New York. I think of all the places in the world you could live, why would you want to go and live in New York? It didn't make sense until I got there.
Yeah.
And I get it. I completely get it. New York is just a very, very big Liverpool. London,
I agree with that.
Is a big Liverpool. And when Richard and I went to Hamburg and we go down by the river, it's just like being in Liverpool or being in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that connection that I'd started with the Liverpool, New York one all those years ago. And Richard and I had been talking and said, we've got to find a project at some point to work on together.
Yeah.
And I said to him, well, what do you think? And we started those things. Now, Richard saying he felt comfortable in Liverpool. I said, well, I've got that with New York. Why don't we talk to Susan? And that's it. It's while you were in Liverpool, wasn't it, Susan?
It was.
Yep.
David originally proposed this to me. I was in Liverpool in 2017, and we got together, and he proposed this to me, and it took a while for us to sort of all three of us to come together. But like we were saying, David, it's funny. In 2017, I spent 10 days in Liverpool, so I was there for a chunk of time, and it was the first time I'd been there for more than a day at a time. And it's just like what you said, though. I stepped outside of the place I was staying, which was right in the city center, and it was like coming home. It was crazy. I rarely feel that comfortable in another city. There's very few places that will make me feel instantly comfortable, and Liverpool was one of them. And I think I even mentioned it in my intro in the book, like when I'm standing, the first time that I was standing at the pierhead, looking at the river and looking at the Wirral Peninsula across the way and going, it looks like standing in Manhattan looking at Brooklyn. It was so familiar and so comfortable. And there was also this, in all three cities, because I've not been to Hamburg, in all three cities, there's a sensibility of the people. There's this idea that people from these cities are a certain way, New Yorkers are rude, Liverpudlians are this, Londoners are that. And yet, underneath all of that way that people think we are all very, very similar. There's a sensibility to the people. There's a friendliness and cheerfulness to the people in all of these places, willing to help tourists, willing to want to show off our towns. So there's very much a similarity in the outlook as well.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
it's so when David and Richard approached me with this idea, I didn't even have to hesitate. It was one of these, okay, absolutely, let's do it. And we did.
And that's why there's no Beatles France, because we don't want those French people. Kidding. Kid, we just lost our French listeners. It was right out the window.
Right, we'll take the Statue of Liberty back now.
It's also how the Beatles progressed. Liverpool first, conquered Liverpool, went to Hamburg, conquered Hamburg, London, conquered the UK, went to New York, conquered the world, you could say. That's how the Beatles went. And but they probably felt at home in each city as well.
Yeah.
To start with, kind of outsiders when they first went, but in each city they were welcomed and became part of the furniture, you could say, almost, certainly in the outside of Liverpool. I mean, they came to London. It's like, what's some Liverpool? Then of course they're part of swinging London, and they're all part of the scene. So same in Hamburg as well. Don't want them here, but got Derry and the Seniors, wasn't it? Saying we don't want them in Hamburg. They ruined the scene because they conquered Hamburg, and that's how the Beatles went. That's their progression.
Well, I have a question. Tony, you haven't asked many questions. I don't want to bust in on Tony. You have a question, Tony?
Well, no, I mean, the main, you guys have covered some of the questions that I had been thinking about, but my thought was, again, relating to sort of with Sue, with the ups and downs emotionally with what goes on. When you guys bring people on the tour, what would you say, and David, you alluded to it with the Casbah, but as far as when you bring folks around, two thoughts. First, how do you handle the emotional outbursts? You're bound to have people who are going to, I won't say fall apart, but they're going to really get very emotional about a specific site. And the truth is, obviously, it's a tour. You have to move on. And secondly, for the folks that are with you, what are sites that you feel are the, oh my God, moments that catch them off guard, that make them not realize how moved they were going to be being in a certain spot than when they actually are standing there? So it's kind of a twofold question there. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we will all get people who are emotional. A lady about 3 weeks ago who was here, and what often happens is probably about 3/4 of the tours we do are for Americans, and they'll be the first generations. They'll have watched Ed Sullivan, and they've waited for all these years. And for us as guides, we know that this is their once in a lifetime trip to go somewhere they have waited decades. And so, we put everything into making that day special. And one of the great things with doing private tours, majority of mine are private tours. I don't do many bus tours, is that if they need more time at a certain location, that's fine. And we just wait, give them time. And this lady got upset on 2 or 3 different places. First of all, because a lot of them come off the cruise ships. We get about 100 cruise ships into Liverpool every year now. And so suddenly you got a couple of thousand fans wanted to go and see everywhere. And they come off and they're so excited. And, because they've been waiting for so long and they can't get all the words out. So you get all that stuff. And then, it can be different sites. And that's one of those things that sometimes it can be Mendips when they get to the house that John grew up in, because they know that John was murdered back then. So coming to where he was as a child is very emotional. And quite often one of those big gasp moments is when you start to go through, well, this was John's childhood, which is what we did with the Looking for Lennon film, which was, taken away from his mum when he's 5. He comes here to live with Mimi. He's not with his mum and his dad. And then when you explain his Uncle George, who's his father figure, drops dead suddenly when John's 14. And then you turn around and say, and over the road there when he was 17, his mum was killed. When you put those, that can be a very emotional point, because we know how badly affected John was by losing his mum.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of tragedy there. And that's one of those times when certain things click. You can just see it in the faces of the fans thinking, okay, I'm starting to understand John a little bit better now.
Yeah.
And so, you allow them just whatever time they need. And they'll normally be the one to go, oh, right, okay, I'm okay now. And off we go. And it's just being able to give them that time, because this is probably the only time in their life they're ever going to do it. We say, like, where you going to go? I mean, you've agreed it all beforehand where you're going to take them. Right. But you just give them that time at whatever location it is for them, so that they can, have their memories. Sometimes they'll tell you what it is. Sometimes they'll just apologize. Say nothing to apologize for at all.
Right.
Well, David and Richard, is Hamburg as naughty as people talk about over the years?
We have absolutely no idea. My lawyer told me to say.
Well, wait, because we heard it was the naughtiest city in the world.
We'd heard that as well.
Yeah.
No first-hand knowledge, right?
No, absolutely not. And the fact I was there for 5 days 2 months ago was for research.
It was for research.
More research. The book's already out, David.
Why was it at midnight?
Well, we did walk down Herbertstrasse, didn't we, David?
We were forced to.
Yeah, I know.
There was a big gate and we said, don't make us go there, and said you have to walk down there.
No, mustn't do this. No.
And those girls must have been freezing. Absolutely freezing cold.
I know.
So we were thinking of starting a charity just to buy them some clothes to wear.
Yeah.
You're a good man, David Bedford.
Go to 34 Montague Street. He's the tailor. He'll get you some clothes.
There you go. He spends his time clothing naked people, right?
Exactly. They're all emotional naked people. It works.
Yeah, but we certainly gave up the idea of looking for 2 virgins.
I have to tell you, and I've said this story before, going back to the emotion. I was there first in Liverpool in February of '96 when the Liverpool coach died. And I was in the cavern and everybody started singing You'll Never Walk Alone. Yeah. Now for me, You'll Never Walk Alone, I know maybe Richard and David won't know this, but Jerry Lewis sang that on Labor Day telethons at the end of each telethon. So it meant something to me because I was involved with the organization, but it meant something totally different to, for the Liverpool Football Club. And when he passed and we were in the cavern and Len Garrett was there that night, my buddy and I, they just grabbed us and just started singing. And it didn't matter who we were or where we were from. They just grabbed us and we all started singing You'll Never Walk Alone. It was like one of the most emotional moments, even though I knew I wasn't in the correct cavern. But it didn't matter because, you know, again, I felt like, wow, I was so at home. It just felt like, and from then on, you know, walking down the streets and stuff, I felt like I was in New York, just a smaller New York. So, you know, it was such a great feeling, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely that sense wherever we go amongst those cities. I think one of the other things that sort of inspired us, that sort of Richard was saying before, was John's quote of, I was born in Liverpool but grew up in Hamburg. And I just sort of paraphrased it: reached maturity in London and immortality in New York. It was just taking that progress, that if you want to follow the path of how the Beatles became famous, how they reached that, you've got to go and look at their apprenticeship. You've got to see where they started in Liverpool as kids. You know, they did not just have a stroke of good luck like you can get on one of these talent shows. You know, they worked thousands of hours and they put the hard work in. And when you follow that through Liverpool, through Hamburg, through London, and through New York, you realize they deserve their success. Because not always do the most talented people get the recognition they deserve, but they worked so hard. And I was amazed when I was working on Liverpool that I'll make a list of the venues they played. There's over 100 of them just in the Liverpool area between the Quarrymen and the Beatles that they played.
Most people don't know that. They think, oh, they played the Cavern.
Yeah,
exactly.
No.
And they were playing, like, quite often they would be playing 3 gigs a day. They played the Cavern at lunchtime, another gig, and then come back and finish at the Cavern that night. You know, and then look at the 6 or 7 hours a night they were playing in Hamburg. You know, they worked really hard for what they got.
I want to say something about the emotionality of the Beatles, because in 2019 I organised the 50th anniversary celebrations of the Beatles walking across Abbey Road, which is just 4 guys walking across a road. And I reckon 1,000 people turned up to the crossing that day, literally all over the world, who organised their holidays especially to do that. And there's people proposing marriage to each other on the crossing that day.
Yeah.
My friend Joe Kane, who plays Paul we had a band proposing as the Beatles on the crossing, and Joe proposed to his girlfriend Lindsay on the crossing as part of the anniversary celebrations. The band arrived in a replica of John Lennon's succulent Rolls Royce that my friend owns, which is quite fun. And it was on TV around the world, literally around the world, front page of one of our national newspapers, The Guardian. And this is just 4 people on the crossing, bringing people all over the world together. And the love that day was, you can almost cut with a knife. It was just like the love for the Beatles and everyone else. And that was an amazing, that's probably my highlight of my doing the Beatle tours, basically, was that organising that.
The emotion is very, the emotion is very strong. You know, I mean, there's always an emotional connection. I think because the Beatles mean so much to so many people that, and I find that, I've had people fall apart. I mean, a lot of times I've had people cry at the Dakota or at Strawberry Fields, you know, whatever. And that's okay. You know, like David said, you give them the time to collect themselves. And since we're doing these tours, you know, privately most of the time, where we give them the time that they need. I tell people, I'm not going to rush you through something. If you're having an emotional moment, please feel free. But it's interesting to me how many people have this absolutely visceral emotional connection to these 4 guys. You know, I mean, we are among them. The 6 of us that are sitting here now are all among those people. But there are millions of people like us, you know, and I've started this year. It's funny because I don't just talk about Beatles fans or Beatles people. Since the pandemic, I've been saying things like Beatles community. Because it's more than just a collection of fans, more than just a collection of people. It's a true community. We all know each other, support each other, you know, feel the same emotions. And I think that is another very important connection that we have. So when you go to these places, there's this deep, visceral, emotional component. And it's so important because it's just something that links us all together and links the cities together and makes us as tour guides love our job so much. You know?
Oh, yeah.
I think one of the things for me that I've noticed of being part of this Beatles community, and we've sort of hinted at that whole thing about feeling at home in each other's cities, is when we go to something like the fest, it's something that I think John alluded to in Imagine, which was the whole idea of being, you know, no religions, no borders, no countries, is that there's this amazing Beatles family which isn't defined by a country, by borders. It's not defined by the color of your skin, how you speak, anything like that. None of that matters, because when Beatles fans come together, there's something wonderful that connects everybody, that all those prejudices and biases that people may have consciously or unconsciously, they don't matter, because there's this amazing thing that has been built around All You Need Is Love, which wasn't just a throwaway line just to make a song. There is something so positive in that. And I think that's why being accepted into the Beatle world, I've made so many friends from so many countries around the world, which I would never have made if I hadn't been part of this Beatles community. And it's something wonderful. And I think in a way that's something we were trying to do with the book, is saying the four cities, yeah, they're important, but why they're important is because they're connected and the people are similar. And if you can connect people from the UK, from Germany, from New York, and find all these things in common, well, we can do it with any country in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you're very much onto something there, because I say this, I've been saying this for 47 years. My life would not be the life I have without the Beatles and the community surrounding them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Mine definitely would not. I've said it before, so I think you're right. I think, as I said, the Beatles definitely help a lot of us out of the dark periods, but they also create so many good periods.
Hey, I don't know Mitch and Tony otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
And I never meet David Bedford and Susan, and I don't go on Richard's tour. So
Yeah.
Well, whenever I do see Paul, I do want to slap him and say, because of you, I know Rob Leonard.
thank you. As well,
Next a slap from me as well.
I'll give him a slap.
you should pay him cash. Anyway, that just about does it for our show. I just want to say that I've hung out with David Bedford in Liverpool. And when I went to Liverpool, I just want to say this, I never thought I would care the way I did after I left.
Yeah.
And because my sister was in London for 4 years. The first 3 years, she kept saying, come over. I said, what do I care? You know, I don't want to hang out with the Beatle nerds. And of course, I am a Beatle nerd, but but it was nice to see everything. And David was especially nice driving me around. I mean, he showed me some places that aren't on the tours, you know, these places the Beatles played and stuff. And then I remember I was supposed to go to the Casbah at 4:00, and I'm David's driving somewhere, and I'm like, where the hell are we? I had no idea where we were. You didn't say anything. And I'm saying, well, am I going to get to the Casbah? And all of a sudden you make a left, and there's the Casbah. I mean, and it's a house in the middle of a neighborhood. It's like if you were here on Long Island, it'd be like driving through Garden City. You know, it's one of these houses, and it's the basement. And David, I agree with you. The Casbah probably is incredibly saved, and it is incredibly saved. And it's hard to believe they actually played there. It's a 7-foot ceiling.
Yeah.
You know? And it's amazing that everything is still there out of everything. The Caverns is a redo, which I felt very comfortable in. And the two houses that are now part of the National Trust, so there's a lot in Liverpool. We know in New York. Richard, I've been on your tour. It was wonderful. The book
We're
is
all going to get to Sue's. We should do Sue's en masse. That would be.
You know
You
what?
three need to do that
Call
together.
me. Talk to
be
me.
fun.
We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen.
Well, okay. The book we've been talking about is The Beatles, Fab Four Cities, Liverpool, Hamburg, London, and New York. Our guests have been Richard Porter, Susan Ryan, and David Bedford, the unofficial mayor of Liverpool. Thank you guys for joining the Fab Four Free for All. My name is Rob Leonard. Thank you, Mitra Axelrod and Tony Triguardo. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Fab Four Free For All was edited and produced by Tony Triguardo at Word of Mouth Studios in Westbury, New York.
The opening and closing theme is My Dolly by the band The Badge, featuring longtime listener Jeff Slate, available on its debut album Digital Retro and recent Best Of compilation, as well as from the Fab Four Free For All website.
Thanks for listening to Fab Four Free For All.